I think we can go ahead and get started. We're getting there. A few more people to pop in, but we'll get started. And I don't know if we need this slides yet. But hello, I'm Jennifer Clem. I'm from Central Michigan University, and I am your chair this year. I just want to welcome everybody to the 2021-2022. It's still hard for me to say 2022 academic year. And do we have, while we're in gallery mode, do we have any new members? If we do, could you do the little nice emoji wave or something? Or yep, or Carl, hi Carl, hand wave. We just want to welcome all of our new members or schools that are joining us to DARTEP. I'm not seeing a lot of hands, but I don't see all the pages. Okay, so I want to introduce you to our leadership team. We have Susan English, Aquinas College. She is our the chair-elect, and she'll be helping out. She'll be helping out with a lot of the note minutes and the note taking. Susan, do you have anything you want to say? No? Oh, okay.
Sorry, couldn't get it unmuted. Clicking. No, just happy to see all these faces. Totally wish, like Sally said, that we were in person, but that will happen eventually. And for anyone who is new and has not attended a session, it's worth the drive.
And then we have our treasurer, Beth Byton from Oakland University. Beth?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Just wanted to say hi. I'm getting a couple messages in the chat. So some of you are saying that you didn't get any information about paying dues. I only sent those letters to your institution contact. So if you aren't sure who that person is, shoot me a chat and I can let you know who I sent your information to at your institution. And I'll give you a treasurer's update shortly. Thanks.
And although not officially on the leadership team for DARTEP, I want to acknowledge Brian Philpett. Oh my gosh, I'm saying it wrong. Brian, I'm going to say your last name wrong.
Filipiak, as a 12-year-old once said, like maniac. So.
Brian is, thank you. That's embarrassing. Brian is from Eastern Michigan University, and he does all of our technology support, website support. So he definitely deserves kudos. He does a lot of work for us. Okay, so maybe Brian, if you could put up I think we're ahead to slide 4. If you could put that up for us for the meeting dates. So meeting dates, we had a little bit of a change. So we are going to do virtual for the October 1st meeting, the December 3rd meeting, and the February 4th meeting. For April 8th, we are really hoping that will be in person at Hope College. This was changed. This was originally on the 15th, but that is Good Friday. So we needed to change that date to April 8th. I realize that this is spring break for some institutions. So we will do our best to record that meeting if you're not able to be there. And then just keeping an eye on anything that happens around COVID or COVID protocols. Hopefully, we'll work with Hope College and we'll hopefully know, and I don't want to put Doug on the spot, that maybe by February we'll know for sure if that's a go, so you can plan. Does that sound reasonable, Doug?
Nope, sounds good.
Okay.
Could I also just add that the Hope Conference is also being scheduled to be in person, and that would be the Wednesday and Thursday just before that DARTEP meeting.
Perfect. So we're hoping that we will be able to come together at Hope College. So hope all that goes well with that. All right, next, Brian. So I added in the chat the link to the forms. Your leadership team really wanted to gather some feedback on ideas of things you would like to discuss or presentations you'd like us to put together for this next year. If you didn't get a chance to fill that out, please, I just put it in the chat. It's still open. You're welcome to add your input. It's pretty short, just a few questions. But from the input we did receive, I wanted to share with you, these are some of the topics and how they were rated. So I think a lot of people are interested in a teacher shortage discussion. What are some effective experimental or accelerated programs out there? Talking about the 5, 9, 7, 12 grade bands, which we will talk about a bit today. The teacher cadet pipeline, those type of things. As you can see, we're rated high. We do have some accreditation needs. Believe it or not, your early adopters are about ready to go through the second cycle of CAPE. I can't believe it has gone that fast, but here we are. Next. And then some ideas that people's other ideas that were suggested, developing an online program with virtual clinical placements, UX improvements, core teaching practice assessments. Maybe if we work together to develop some of those as a group. And then more discussion about the transition to districts offering sketches for student teaching and free service hours. Those were some other ideas. And then we also were wondering if you would like the Java-like sessions extended and that we spent a little more time in those Java-likes. I think overall, people were interested in possibly having more time in the Java-likes, but maybe with some structure to them so that there were either questions in advance or there was we had some structure to those Java-likes and maybe they just weren't completely open-ended. And so one thing we have added to the registration is a spot for you to ask questions or questions you want answered in the Java-like. That way we can also prepare the MDE to have those answers for you when you get into the Java-like sessions. I do see a comment. Will all the meetings be 9 to noon? I probably can't say that for sure. Most likely, I would think probably 1 o'clock at the latest, depending on what guests we have and if we need a little bit more time. But any questions about the input or anything anyone wants to add to that? I mean, please feel free to add your comments into the link and we will look at those into the form, the survey. But I'm also happy we can discuss that now too. And I'm terrible at wait time on virtual, so. The PowerPoint, yes, Sally, will be shared after the meeting. Brian will put it on the website. Okay, we have some DARTEP business. First up, we need to approve the minutes from April of 2021. This is the link. I can add it to the chat. You had it in your registration from Brian. Oops. Here's my chat.
Sally Ray, Sienna Heights, so moved.
There's the link again if you need it.
Lisa Ings, Barris, support.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve, motion second. With this large of a group, do we just do those that don't approve? Is that acceptable? Okay. So anybody that does not approve the minutes, say aye or indicate in the chat. Let's do that. Okay. Minutes from April are approved. Okay. Next slide.
I'll go ahead and give the treasurer's report. So Brian, you're welcome to click through. I've got some bullets on this slide. I haven't gotten our September statement today because it's only October 1st, but you can see our balance as of August. A couple things that we've been working on is updating our banking information. So we actually have to update our bank account with the Michigan Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. And so behind the scenes, we are working to do that. We also need to remove Michael McDonald from the bank account and add Susan English. So I just wanted you to be aware of a couple of those things. The other thing that we're going to be doing in June is taking a look at our contract with Merchant Services. That's the group that allows us to have a virtual terminal and allows me to take your credit cards for dues payments. Their fees are pretty high, and so we're going to take a look at some other options again in June when our contract expires, and we're going to look at other things such as Square as a possible way to do it. So stay tuned for more information on that in the summer. On the next slide, I just wanted to give you an update on where we are with our dues. So what I've done is I've sent out a letter to each institution to update their membership list and also to pay the dues. I just sent the letter to whoever was listed as the EPI contact. So if you are not sure who your contact is, or you just want to verify it, feel free to chat me or email me. So far, we've had 16 institutions that have updated their membership, which is great. I did get a message from Michigan Tech that their last students have graduated, so they will not be joining us. So best wishes to Michigan Tech. Just a reminder that our dues are remaining at $50 per member. You can pay those virtually in October or November, but after that point, you'll only be able to pay by check. So one of the things we've done to reduce our fees is only have the virtual terminal open for 2 months instead of 12. And again, it just helps reduce our fees. So any questions you have about dues, feel free to let me know. You can see my email is listed at the bottom of the slide. Thank you.
Okay, so we did have a good question before we move on about the minutes. And just so you know, I realize some institutions have one person that covers multiple job alike sessions, can only attend one. So minutes are taken in each of the job alikes and are included in the main minutes. So just so you know that even if you're unable to go to one of the job alikes you would like to, you will still get that information in the minutes. Plus we do a share out. Okay, so we have some voting items. I'm going to put a link to our policies and procedures document, which is always on the DARTEP website. And that is a direct link to it. It's also on the slide. We have some changes we need to vote on. We need to, we're going to just try to do this as one approval for all of the changes, but we'll go over them. So COAT, removing COAT as a standing agenda item on organizational updates. Per their request, remove MATE from a standing agenda item. They will still, when they have announcements, we'll still be able to include those in DARTEP and have the floor when necessary, but it's not necessarily always needed to be a standing agenda item. And then remove for the independents, they kind of have two groups. So we're going to remove the one, and then they'll still report out under, I do not keep all these letters straight. So we wanted to remove that. And then the other other edits we'd like to make is to the technology and expand that a little bit, because of originally Eastern was managing primarily the listserv and keeping track in the website. That obviously with COVID and all of the virtual meetings has really expanded. So we want to include that language in there. So this is housed on the institution that is facilitating which is currently Eastern, but if some other institution were to take that on, that language, we want to change that whole section to technology. And as you can see, we've added some things about the website and also about virtual meetings.
And Jen, I just again want to give a shout out to Brian for handling all of these things over the past year. We couldn't do all this without him. So Brian, just a quick shout out to you.
Agreed. So those are the changes to the policies and procedures. Can I get a motion? You back up, Brian, before we got to vote.
I will make a motion.
Thank you,
Lori
Lori.
Burgess.
Thank you, Lori.
Jennifer Heisler, I'll second it.
I think I heard a second.
Jennifer Heisler.
Oh,
second.
thank you. So any discussion, questions? Lisa, you good? Saw you on mute.
Good.
Okay, so any, I guess, anyone that does not approve, please put it in the chat. Okay, changes to the policies and procedures is approved. Thank you. So we will move on to organization reports. And I believe the first up is MACD.
Hello, everybody. So first I have to do a little bit of a plug. We didn't quite reach the membership threshold that we needed in order to have the 25% dues reduction from AACTE. We're just a couple institutions short. But I anticipate us being being able to get that this coming year. We need 75% of our EPPs to be members of the master organization of AACTE. A little interesting fact that if you join now for next year, October, November, and December will be free for this year, which would allow you to register for AACTE conference as a member. So if it's something your institution may be paused on because of recent financial burdens, that might be a consideration. The second part, that's the boring part. The second part is our buddy Roland Kalama at Wayne State University has really helped us organize our October 27th, 2021 fall conference. And I'm going to put a link to the flyer in the chat. And he has organized a wonderful panel to discuss critical race theory in schools, the struggle for a more inclusive curriculum. And we feel this will be a very timely discussion, panel discussion with members from the MEA, the Michigan Association of Superintendents and Administrators, the ACLU, as well as our higher ed participants from Wayne State, Indiana, Kentucky, and Michigan State. And so I really want to encourage people to attend. It's just an hour and a half. And we're hoping for some important conversations around that area. And if there are any questions, I do have a new email address that I will put into the chat. If people are interested in joining or knowing more about MACD, please feel free to reach out. And if or you can message me in the little comment thing too. And so now I'll be quiet so we can move on.
Thank you, Beth. It's good to see you. Okay, Michigan Public Deans.
Yeah, do we have a volunteer for for that group.
Well, I can talk a little bit. I was only able to attend half of the meeting, unfortunately. But one of the important things to have on our radar, and something that actually with MACD that we were a day on the Hill that we were actually talking to Stabenow and Peter's office right now, is the free tuition or for community college movement, that this could significantly impact some of the regional and other institutions with respect to enrollment and our 100, 200 level courses, and the impact this would have on our institutions. And so just to put that on people's radar, if you're talking to your local representatives, when I spoke with Peters and Stabenow staffers last week, I prefaced it by saying, don't think that Beth is saying we shouldn't support higher ed and tuition. You know, I'm not saying I'm against that, but just if there was some way they could consider for the 4-year and higher colleges and universities, other kinds of granting. So just a little bit of that kind of information is something to put on the radar. Was anyone else at the meeting that could share something in the afternoon that they thought was important, or I will pause? So, all right, so that I think might wrap it up.
Okay, thank you. And the Michigan Independent Educator Preparation Institutions. We have a report out for that.
All right, I'll go ahead. My name is Lori Burgess, and I am a co-chair for what we call My Pie with Susan English. We met back in May, a few months ago, and just briefly, our discussion focused around the AQUEP piloting programs that a few institutions are going to pursue. And then most of our conversation was also around grade banding. So that's short and sweet. That's what I've got.
Okay, thank you. And what do we have? Oh, that leads us up to MDE.
Great, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to 2021-22. It's my pleasure to be with you for another kickoff here. Joining me in today's meeting from my team, we do have Leah Breen, our office director, Sarah Kate Levan, our office assistant director, Kate Boswell Gallagher, manager of our data and accountability unit, and then Jason Kalmbach, who is an education research consultant in Kate's unit. From the educator preparation unit, we have higher education consultants, Gina Garner and Darcy McMahon, and our education assessment specialist, Bridget McDowell, our department analyst, Dana Utterbeck, and our contractor, a familiar face, Donna Feeblecourt, who you'll hear from today on a couple of initiatives. That is the extent of the people who registered. So if somebody didn't register and is in the meeting and from MDE, feel free to shout out at some point, and apologize for not acknowledging you. On the screen, wanted to lead off with a shout out to our regional teachers of the year and our Michigan teacher of the year, Leah Porter, from Wilcox Elementary in Holt, out of Region 6. A big pat on the back to all of you who've supported these individuals in becoming excellent teachers that they are. And we hope to bring, as we've done the last couple of years, a panel of the regional teachers of the year to speak with you, perhaps at December, maybe at the February meeting. So still to come. Next slide, please. Always a shout out to follow us on social media. We're there on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We also have a YouTube channel, My Educator. We've got our hashtags, our educationally speaking newsletter. In your written DARTEP updates that went out earlier this week, there's a link to sign up for that newsletter if you don't already receive it. It does go out to all certified teachers and, well, anybody who's got a certificate in MOEX. And as you post great things about the educators that you're preparing or the teacher educators that you work with, please use our hashtag Proud Michigan Educator, hashtag PME in your social media posts. We can raise the image and raise up good teaching. Next slide, please. All right, we'll start with some legislative updates, and some of this is fresh. Out of the headlines, some things that have happened since April. So signed into law, Public Act 15. This is a reduction of the salary deductions for non-certified teachers if the district comes into compliance within 10 days of notification. It waived the deduction of salaries for a year, and then has a reduced deduction for in the future for teachers that are not placed correctly. State School Aid Act, $240 million was allocated to districts for increasing the number of school psychologists, school social workers, school counselors, and school nurses. If you have a preparation program in one of those areas, then this would be worth your notice to collaborate with local districts in your area who take advantage of that money. And last on this slide, the state budget was signed with much fanfare on Wednesday. There's a bit.ly to a Michigan Department of Education press release on this, the specific pieces of the budget that align to Michigan's top 10 strategic education plan. All right, go to the next slide. Some bill activity. There's a bill in the House, 4294, allowing substitute teaching with fewer than 60 credits if the person is already employed by the district. That passed the House in June and awaits Senate consideration and action. And Senate Bill 321, which passed the Senate just this week, was featured on Michigan radio, actually. So if you heard that, and Senator Santana speak about it. This is a mental health professional development bill for teachers. It has a department developing professional learning standards in mental health for teachers, and then of course any professional learning that teachers engage in related to this obviously count toward professional learning obligations for certificate renewal, as well as the district provided professional development. Two bills that were introduced since April to keep an eye on, both in the House. One is to create a military teaching certificate. What this does is establishes somebody received some kind of credential in the military that allowed them to teach in any branch of the military, that they could get a Michigan teaching certificate automatically without any other requirements like testing or others. So that's the language of the law. The second bill, and I've had some email chats with a few people about it, is about establishing adopting a nationally adopted teacher licensing exam to replace the MTTC program. You can see both were introduced. There's no action on them since their introductions. So you can go and read the full text at the legislative website. The next slide, please.
Sean, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
This is Sally Ray, sorry. Military teaching certificate?
Yep.
What was the purpose behind that? Do you know, do you know it in a synopsis with, I can go read it, but I
Well,
wonder if anybody else had the same thought, like, really?
Yeah, well, it's part of supporting our military members and veterans in transitioning to the civilian workforce or transitioning back to the civilian workforce. You can see the date that was introduced right around Memorial Day, so there's some symbolism there. Our first blush when we looked at it was, what exactly is a military teaching certificate? Like, what is
Right.
We didn't know. And frankly, if there's anybody here that knows more about the specific kinds of teaching credentials issued by the branches in the military, I'd be very interested to know what they are. I don't know if Leah has picked up any additional chatter, intel, thoughts on it.
So this one's a little hazy because, as Sean mentioned a couple of times, it was introduced back in May. But if I remember correctly, it had to do with things like teaching ROTC and military-based coursework. But I wouldn't swear to that. I'd have to go back and reread it myself.
Okay, thanks. When you're just looking at programs that are already in place that military can use, I was just curious as to how that came about. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. All right.
To that note, just really quick, they often don't realize there are things in place when they draft these bills, and that's part of the conversation we have in follow-up and often why they don't move forward.
Got it. Yep. Thanks, Leah.
Yep.
All right, we have some MTTC updates. I'd like to turn the mic over to Bridget to share some things.
Morning, everybody. Yeah, we have several.
Hi.
We have a bunch of MTTC updates, so bear with me as we go through these slides. So with the lower and upper elementary timelines, I just wanted to give you a quick look at what's coming up. We are currently finishing our big first wave of item development and developing practice tests, which is really exciting. We've had so many higher ed faculty members from across the state joining us for this committee work, and having that input is just really critical. And I want to thank you for if you've participated or if you have encouraged your staff to participate, it helps a lot. Coming up next is pilot testing, kind of field testing that should be sometime this semester. Oh, has anyone else lost audio while Sean? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Okay, I'm seeing some nods. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have pilot testing coming up for these two fields, and it's a great opportunity. This is where we kind of get like some actual data from your candidates. So if you have folks who might want to get like a little preview about what some questions might look like, you will see emails coming from me to the DARTEP listserv encouraging your candidates to participate. They can get, I think it's like a Barnes & Noble gift card or a test voucher, so they get some incentive as well. And then in the spring, we are going to have standard setting for these two fields, which is like a really big deal because that is where we decide what the cut scores are going to be for each subtest. And we will need more higher ed folks to participate in that as well. Can we get the next slide, please? So as I said, all NTTC test development depends on input from pre-K-12 teachers and teacher educators. We always need people to help for lower upper elementary, but also just any fields that we have in development. And you can nominate your faculty or your teachers, your candidates, your teacher educators, your cooperating teachers that you work with at this website, which I just put in the chat. So can you get the next slide, please? Thank you. There have been many questions coming from lots of places about the structure of the test. So I just wanted to give a reminder that the lower elementary pre-K 3 is its own test, and the upper elementary 3 through 6 is its own test, and that each of those tests have 4 subtests. So this is a different kind of structure from our current big elementary K-8 103 exam. So on the next slide, we have a table that kind of breaks it down to show each lower elementary and upper elementary have this same structure. They each have 4 subtests: professional knowledge, literacy, math, science and social studies is combined. So you'll see that there's more items on the science and social studies test. The costs are basically the same. Math has more graphics, it costs a little more. The passing score will be 220 on our scaled score, which is exactly the same passing score, scaled score as it is for every MTTC exam. Candidates are considered to have passed the lower elementary test or passed the upper elementary test once they've met the passing score for each subtest. So for those of you who have candidates in the pursuing the MC endorsement, it's very similar to that, where you have to pass the subtest required to pass the entire exam. We've gotten some questions from candidates who are wondering if they can like mix and match across grade bands, and that is not allowed because they do point to 2 different endorsements. So if you pass professional literacy and math for pre-K 3 and you pass science and social studies for 3-6, you can't combine those. The math costs a little bit more because the development is more intensive. It requires more graphics. It just takes a lot more resources to develop that test. Good question. Thank you. One of the advantages to this structure is that candidates can test as they feel ready. So they have a lot of flexibility. Once they, for example, finish their literacy related coursework, as far as MDE is concerned, they can take the test whenever they feel like it's appropriate for them. Those score reports will also have more detailed information than what's currently offered. So those of you who've looked at, say, the current elementary test know that the feedback on literacy on world language and ELA is pretty limited. It's just like a scale of 1 to 4 pluses. How well did you do on all of all of ELA? With the new test, if let's say a lower elementary candidate takes the literacy exam and they get they'll get a pass, no pass, just like they do now. They'll also get a rating in each sub area. So if a candidate doesn't pass their lower elementary literacy and they see that their lowest performance is maybe in like literacy skills, instruction and practices, well, they can go back to their courses that they took on like print concepts, phonological awareness, phonics, spelling, handwriting, word recognition, morphology, syntax. And because our frameworks are much more tightly aligned to the standards, it should be easier for candidates and for providers to map the course offerings to the test frameworks. And that would hopefully make your job easier by offering candidates more obvious connections to the coursework that they completed, and ultimately reducing the need for remediation for outside required coursework that they may need. Let's see. On the next, oh, sorry.
We have some questions in the chat.
Oh, yeah. There are quite a few. Okay.
There are quite a few. I'll start with, because I had the same question. So if candidates take the subtest early, when can we claim them on the eligibility roster? Will each subtest be reported to EPPs separately? So right now we're kind of bound by a percentage of curriculum has to be completed before we can consider them eligible, which is defined, but so eligibility is different.
That's a good question, and I am sorry, I'm kind of blanking on a response to that right now. So it's because there's, yeah, with the 90% of coursework is the recommendation for candidates to be ready to take their MTTC. And I am, I know I'm sorry, I don't know if Sean might have any input to provide on this.
No, and in fact, I was just thinking about the same thing, and I thought, I bet someone's going to ask about this when we got to this slide. We will have to. That it is a good thing. We'll have to work with on, in our with our test vendor on looking at that eligibility criteria. My first blush impression would be the kind of how we treat individual endorsement tests right now. So if somebody is doing a elementary and an early childhood, if they've done all of their early childhood courses and there's nothing more for them, but they're still, well, not near the 90% mark for their whole program, we'd recommend, claim them as eligible. They've completed all of the content that's covered on that test. That can, and as clean as that sounds, that can get very complicated in looking at the different structures. So we've been reviewing your programs and we see, where culminating pieces for each of these areas are. And in some cases, it's not going to happen until the end, right? You're not going to get 90% of any of your content areas done until pretty much the same time toward the end of the program, and others it's spread out. So it's something we're going to have to look at a little bit now that we see what some of the programs look like, and see if we can create some better, cleaner criteria for determining eligibility. Jamie McDonald noted that current eligibility rosters are listed by test number. Good point, and this will be too, because each of these subtests will have its own test number. In the same way that right now, the health and PE has two subtests, but each test has its own number.
Thank you, Sean. I saw Lori had a question about vouchers, and I have a slide on that later, but if I don't address your question, then Lori, please let me know. And yes, I agree, candidates will appreciate the score reports with more detailed information. I think that's going to help a lot. Okay, so on our next slide, a question we get a lot is about test prep resources. There are things that you can point your candidates to and your faculty to that are free. We have quarterly webinars that ES has started offering. We've been doing it for about a year now. I send emails about it to let you know when the dates are announced. And they're also on the MTTC website. They're free and open to anybody. Your faculty can join it. Your first year candidates can join it. Your recent graduates, cooperating teachers, anybody's welcome. There is also a lot of faculty resources on the MTTC website. And I think, as the new elementary programs are starting, this might be helpful exercise. So on the faculty resources website, there are several links. Underneath understanding test content, there's a section about helping candidates prepare. And there's a link about determining whether a candidate's coursework covers the content. And that is where, some of these maps that you've been working on to how the state approved standards map to your courses, since you've already done that work, and because the tests are so tightly aligned to the state approved standards, that should be not a lot of extra translating to help candidates when they go back and say, I didn't do well in the phonics section of my literacy subtest for pre-K 3, I don't remember which class I went to. There's a worksheet there on the website that you know, can help your staff figure out what course that happened in, as an example. And on the last slide, we have vouchers updates, which I know you've all seen. So as you know, evaluation systems annually provides vouchers to all providers in Michigan and the department. Each provider can use their own criteria for distributing vouchers. Traditionally, each voucher has been worth $129 to cover the cost of one exam, and they have not been combinable. So you would only, your candidates were only able to use one per transaction. And if they were going to register for, say, like secondary social studies and secondary math, they'd have to like register twice, and that's kind of a hassle. We have, with the new upper and lower elementary exams, both of which use the subtest model, several providers have raised concerns about wisely using voucher resources. And we didn't want, you know, a school that gets a handful of vouchers at $129 to essentially lose, you know, $60 of each of those. So we negotiated, in response, we negotiated with evaluation systems to change the voucher program. So some vouchers, some changes, like we have a slight increase in total funds available across the state, which is great news. Vouchers can be combined to use in a single transaction, which is very helpful. They're now valued at $69 each. And Lori, about your question earlier about vouchers offered per subtest, this is our response to that, so that there's some flexibility. $69 covers the most expensive subtest for the new exams, and we did that because these are going to be it's our highest volume field. There's also an increase in the total number of vouchers available, which makes sense because they're valued at less per voucher. So, you know, we hope these changes are going to help allow our candidates, more candidates access support in covering or offsetting the test fees. And we also anticipate that, you know, providers will maybe enjoy some additional flexibility in providing financial assistance to their candidates. You should have, someone at your institution should have received voucher codes and provider and candidate instructions in September. If you are not sure who at your school received that, I'll put my email in the chat just in case, but I'm happy to look that up for you. And if we need to make a correction, we can. I think that covers it. And I haven't seen new questions pop up in the chat, but I'm happy to take any.
Bridget, where are we with the birth decay MTTC?
Yes, birth decay is behind the lower and upper elementary, which is obviously about to like launch the school year. Birth decay is a little bit behind that. We've had the objectives. Let me double check this. We've had the objectives review meeting where we get input to make sure that the organization for the test structure makes sense. And we will have a content validation survey coming out soon. So that would be something that goes to college faculty and K-12, well, birth decay teachers, certified teachers across the state. That will go out later this month. But the exams are not planned to be launched until the next school year. And that is something that we are talking about with evaluation systems and
so 2022, 2023, somewhere.
That is currently our plan, yes.
They do know that we have candidates that potentially would emerge from programs in the spring of 2023. So our goal is to get the test completed by then. We are working with ES to try to make sure that happens.
Thank you, Gina. Well, that was my last slide. And I think we have data and accountability up next.
Yes, go to the next slide, data and accountability unit updates. We have both Kate and Jason here.
Hello. Before I talk about this slide, I'm taking a moment to quickly plug that we released a 2021 annual educator workforce report. I'm putting a link to it in the chat for everyone. It is also noted within the updates, the written updates that we send out, but can't help passing up an opportunity to plug it again. It covers data across the breadth of, the educator workforce ecosystem. So it includes a lot about preparation, including with the surveys, statewide performance on those surveys, both in the main report and in the very long appendix tables at the end of it. So I wanted to take a moment to plug it for you all, because there may be ideally some information in there that is useful to you. If you have any questions about the report, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I will put in my email address. Could you back up one slide, please? So we just also wanted to send out a reminder that our criminal conviction or professional practices processes changed this past year. We ask that if you have questions around criminal convictions, fingerprinting, things of that nature, please reach out to this MDE-professional-practice@michigan.gov email. We do have staff changing, turnover, and Stephanie Whiteside, who you may normally be in contact with, has been on an extended leave of absence, and that is continuing through January. So if you have questions, your best bet for an efficient timeline and response would be going through our main inbox. That is a team of individuals working on that. This is also noted in the written updates. I know we keep a table of resources and individuals to contact. At the end, there is a table, and professional practices, I believe, has been listed for this inbox for at least the last 2 times. I think that's what Sally is asking. Okay, next slide. And I am going to hand it over to Jason Kalmbach.
Good morning. As a reminder, the new performance score methodology was approved by Dr. Rice in early 2021, and that new methodology will be utilized to calculate the 2022 performance score that will come out early next spring. The 2021 score that you already received, right? So that again, use the old methodology, although we did host a webinar this past May to walk folks through what this new methodology is going to look like. And we also showed you what your 2021 score would have looked like if we were using the 2022 methodology for that particular report. Just a note, we do have 3 additional or 3 remaining indicators that are part of this new methodology that we're still working on: the administrator survey, the candidate gathering candidate and completer data, and trying to figure out what we want to do with a clinical observation tool that all programs might be able to use. We did pilot the administrator survey for 2021, for 2021. I think late August, early September, I sent the results out to folks. We were just piloting that survey, partly concerned about what the response rate would look like. Our response rate looked pretty good for the most part. We sent that survey out to over 15,000 administrators at various school districts, and we received 638 responses, so roughly about a 40% response rate. So that's looking pretty good, but we'll see over the next couple months, we'll consider whether we need to make any tweaks to that survey since we were just piloting it, but then we'll send it out again, probably I think early spring 2022 to include that in the performance score for 2023, roughly. Then this week we were holding 2 sets of focus groups. So earlier this week, Monday and Wednesday, we met with volunteers from various programs to talk about that clinical observation tool, see what it would look like to move forward with that, kind of strategizing over next steps, asking volunteers what sort of critical considerations MDE needs to take into account as we move forward with that. And then we're meeting with folks later today, actually, for the second focus group on gathering candidate and completer data. where we want to look at what are the graduation rates for certain diverse candidates that you have within your program, and seeing if we can include that in the performance score as well. So those are sort of 3 considerations, 3 indicators that we're still working on that you will hear more from us over the coming year. That's all we had on the performance score, Kate.
Right.
Sean, before we move on, back to the BK, we have a couple of comments about some programs will have graduates ready that will be completing spring of 2022. And what should they do?
Go ahead and let us know. We're working with ES to try to get things done as quickly as we possibly can. That's what I could say.
Okay.
And just have them just let us know, and so that you know, we can continue to be in contact with those programs and keep them updated. If they have candidates coming out in the spring, we'll keep them updated as much as we can about when those tests are available.
Okay, thank you, Gina.
We've got a couple of options based on past practices when programs were ready, but the test wasn't. That we need to weigh and see if those are still worth trying out for the BK. So, yeah, keep us apprised so we can keep our feet on the gas with that. And so I'm going to continue here, Gina, right on with administrator standards. So,
all right. Hi, everybody. So our administrator standards were approved by the State Board of Education, our revised administrator standards. They were approved by the State Board August 10th. We're very excited to take it into implementation phase now. Typically, our windows would start about 9 months after that approval, but we do have some institutions that were kind of ready to submit early. So we will have 4 windows, and those are here on the slide. The other piece that I've been talking to administrator programs about, we had a webinar yesterday, or Q&A yesterday that went really well, and then there are upcoming webinars. But a lot of these administrator programs just got full approval over the last 3 years. So rather than require everybody to go back to initial approval, we are going to provide or offer something called continuing approval for programs that currently achieved full approval between 2018 and 2021. You still have to submit an application. You still have to demonstrate that you've aligned the program, your program, with standards. But there are certain sections of the application that we're reserving for brand new programs, like your context and capacity. We already have that. Your partnerships, we already have that. You can give us some changes. But so we've adjusted a little bit. And then we want, you know, once that new program that's aligned to the standards is approved, then you will have continuing approval. And that just sets you right into your accreditation schedule, and further reviews of those programs will be when your institution goes to a CAPE visit or does a CAPE review. Applications will be available, application windows, sorry, are November of 2021, April and November of 2022, and April of 2023. This will be a Qualtrics application plus a matrix, like we've been doing with the educator prep programs. I have a application worksheet available. You can always email me. I'll put my email in the chat. And then I have an application webinar we will run on Friday, October 22nd at 1 p.m. I will send the link out through DARTEP. And then we are going to start administrator program revision workshops as well. Those have been very successful with our teacher preparation programs. And I wanted to give our administrator programs an opportunity to get together and have the same kind of conversations. Those go from November to June. And again, if you'll email me, I can send you a PDF with all of the workshops and their links. And I think that's it. If you have questions about the upcoming application period, please feel free to email me and I will be happy to help you out. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next thing to address is pre-K-12 professional standards. You can go to the next slide. We get this question with some frequency, which professional standards should we be pairing with our K-12 programs or our PK-12 programs? So things like the health and PE, for example, these standalone areas where somebody's just getting certified in that, not where they're adding it onto a PK3 endorsement or a 3.6 endorsement. World languages, for another example, because we understand that as you're redeveloping the professional sequences for your secondary programs, you would probably want to make sure that the you're not having to run two separate professional sequences, one for your K-12 programs and one for the new programs. And so to help you out, Donna Feeblecorn was on our contract and took a good look at the PK3, 3.6, 5.9, and 7.12 professional standards, and then drafted a set that that covers the PK-12 spectrum from the exact language that is in those individual grade band sets, so that it's a consolidated thing, rather than, gosh, we've got to look at every one of these sets when we're planning a PK-12 program. She convened some stakeholders that represented these programs that do have this K-12, PK-12 focus, arts, music, world language, ESL, things like that, to review it and affirm the draft. And they affirmed that these things that we say are important in the standards for each of the separate grade bands are also important for the full PK-12 span. So we anticipate then formally publishing that document very, very soon. Get a notification out about that. So keep an eye for that. In the meantime, as you're working, really look to those 5.9 and 7.12. That's kind of the advice we've been giving, because that was the most recently developed. And in the old MOEX way, all of these K-12 programs were sort of grouped as secondary programs. And then you can pull, supplement as necessary out of PK3 and 3.6. But this is coming soon, and hopefully within the next month we'll have that published for you. Beth posed the question: are we going to have to resubmit for things like psychology, business marketing, management technology, the middle and high school? So you won't have to submit for those programs until those programs have new standards. So you won't have to submit that. You can just submit a with the PK-12 professional. This is the course sequence that applies to all of these other endorsements. And once those get, those other ones get revised, and you're creating and revising those new programs to new standards in those areas, then you'll say, well, they connect to that other set of the K-12 professional. Yes, Susan, yes, her question in the chat, there will be K-12 professional standards. They'll be based on the other grade band standards. Yes. Yes. Yes, they can do new professional, and you don't have to submit. You would just let us know that when you've created this new professional sequence, that these are the things these are the endorsement areas that it applies to. All right. All right. Now, Ed Prep 101. I would like to enlist Donna to talk a little bit about this project. So Donna, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Sean. This has been quite an undertaking with trying to create a more seamless source of information, technical assistance, guidance documents to support all the EPPs as you bring on new personnel and for refresher
updates as program requirements change, ways to address the candidate concerns. On the MDE website, of course, we have lots and lots of guidance documents, but a lot of those are aimed at candidate questions rather than EPP questions. So what we've been involved in, I've been involved in with the team over the last few months, and it's been in the DARTEP updates, and I've talked with the teacher certification job alike groups for it, trying to fine tune all of these guidance documents to make sure we're addressing EPP questions. And the goal is to have an interactive web page where we present options for accessing these both by the person's role, but then also by topic. And we started with the teacher certification officers' concerns because we knew we'd have new cert officers coming on board over the summer. And the transition to the new configuration on the website is in development. So in the meantime, we've been housing any documents that we finalize, any of these guidance documents, on the website, the MDE website, with that link to the educator preparation providers. When you scroll to the bottom of that, there's a link to resources. And we have developed records management, for example, some guidance on continuing certification, initial guidance on MOEX, and of course MOEX is undergoing changes. So we're working on all of this in a very fluid environment with grade banding, and so it's in transition. When we talk about the roles on the next slide, just a sense of where we would be headed, we come up with some graphics. Phil Chase has been working on this to kind of capture what we saw as 7 roles, types of roles that are at an institution. And we've intentionally not defined what each of these roles are because every institution's configured differently. And then we also get overlap. And so if there's not both an accreditation officer and a chair, that might be combined. We have program advisors at some institutions that are separate from cert officers at other institutions. We know cert officers also serve as an advisor. And so trying to come up with the types of things that people who would be doing some of these roles would need. Thinking about the dean being more external, and also then advocating for internal resources. What would that person need to know to make sure the program's sufficiently resourced? A chair or a department chair being more linked with some of the program approval processes, making sure they know what's happening at MDE with standards, and the kind of still bigger picture. The certification officer handling, making sure all of the candidates are moving through meeting criteria that have been set. Accreditation officer keeping up with what's happening with CAPE and national accreditation. Again, lots of overlaps. Program advisor, things like what's the marketability of some of these endorsements? How might you choose between a BK 3 or a 3.6 or the 5.9? Program faculty we see as being responsible for knowing how the standards link with the coursework, the MTTC prep types of things. And then we included content faculty as well, because they have a role certainly in making sure that the students are getting what they need from their
coursework outside of the professional education coursework. Let's see, a non-faculty director of clinical experiences. That would be a good question. And it might be that that really does fit within program faculty, because when we talk about the coursework, the professional education coursework, it's how do we know for sure that students are getting the clinical experiences that they need in the types of settings that they're placed. So even though you're not officially faculty, it's that broader definition. And let me make a note of that, because we continue to, again, find the balance between how we say who should go where, and encourage people to, as we make this interactive, be able to go in and say, well, this doesn't really apply to me, or yeah, this is what I need to know. And it's going to be a work in progress as we fine tune all of these different pieces of the puzzle. How you group different people. I know, again, at different institutions, if you have a program faculty meeting, at what point do the clinical faculty get involved with the discussion of that link between what's happening in coursework and what's happening in the clinical experiences? So that that's a good point. And if we go to the next slide, you can see the types of topics that we've chunked things into, that you see the need for, to varying extents. Content faculty probably don't need to know much about the MDE overview. We have prepared a chart of the ed prep organizations, and that's on that the webpage now, trying to capture just who's out there doing what with educator preparation, all the different things related to cert structure, the marketability, as I said, MOEX in transition, school safety, MTTC, program requirements, and document retention. So let's see, we have, okay, so a suggestion to have a separate clinical coordinator category is a good one. Yeah. And so as we roll these out, having input from you all is essential. The CERT officers have been really good with, as I sent out some initial, here's what we're looking at, and some really good feedback, and trying to capture some of the other groups like that. That would be an important step as we make this next transition to overlaying the topics with the roles, and just which documents are linked to which role. So okay, so there's a question about notifying, who to notify if you're not going to be offering a program. And are you referring to what's in prep?
Yeah, so our art ed program is going to be ending because the Kendall is no longer going to be allowing to whatever, they made a decision to end their art ed. So I just need to know, who do I notify that we are no longer going to be offering art ed, so it gets off the website, the MDE website, so that students, so they're not being referred to us any longer to get that certification.
And I believe that would be Dana, right?
Well, you first reach out to Dan to get a report of program closure. Submit that, we will process it, and then once that's processed, we'll take it. It will go off of the website in the public directory.
So that would be another. It's those types of questions that really help shape the guidance documents that we're developing, because yeah, but I don't know. Where do I go to ask it? That's great. Thanks, Lisa. I don't think there's any other questions at this point. Again, I'll put my email in the chat, and I welcome additional questions and suggestions for how to make this the most useful for EPPs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna. This is very good. Before we will take a break before we go to the next topic, but before we do that, I wanted to leave a moment for any questions on topics that we haven't addressed yet. And we've each gone through and hit the questions as they come through the chat, which is good. But some, sort of go to the order on any topics we didn't address. Feels like adequate wait time without being too awkward. I will note, if you look, Donna put in her email address. There's one extra I in her name there, so be sure to take that out.
Let me put the correction in.
All right. Well, the CERT officer training is this collection of resources that we're working on in EdPrep 101, as laid out. So the next steps are deciding then what additional formats are necessary for the different messages that are going forward. So in Job Alike today, we can, Donna would be with that group, can take your feedback on additional topics that are necessary, as well as formats for those messages. All right.
Okay. We would like to give everyone a quick break here, about 5 minutes. The next topic is going to be the grade bands 5, 9, and 7, 12. MTE will have some content to present, and then we're going to do some breakouts and have a discussion around around the grade bands. So it's 10. I have 10:21. How about 5 minutes? I'm back about 10:26 or so. Get some coffee. Okay, I think most of us should be back. Darcy, do you need a minute, or are you ready to go? Just ready to go.
I didn't know, Sean, do you want to say anything, or you ready for me to?
Yeah, I was just finishing typing a comment back to a question that Marcia raised. Yes, so we so collectively as DARTEP are looking to do to have some focused dialogue, interinstitutional dialogue around the secondary grade bands for 5, 9, and 7, 12. And so the way this next section will work, we'll give you, Darcy will present some visioning around these two grade bands and where we're heading with them, or where we've headed and where we're heading with them. And then there'll be some breakout groups with some focused questions. And I think Jennifer can say more to that point when we get through that. So without any further ado, right ahead.
Great, thanks. It's good to be here with you all today. I was reflecting this morning that the school year is really underway now, because we've got our fall DARTEP. So it's really good to see you all here and be with you, at least virtually today. We're just going to take a little review of what's been going on with the secondary grade bands revision work. So next slide, please. You've asked for it, you've been waiting for it, you've been just on the edge of your seat, I know it's finally here. We have a revised teacher search structure diagram. You can get it at the website that's linked on this slide. I know you'll get that later, so I'll also put it in the chat for you here. And you can see that it addresses those questions that we kept kind of wrestling with around these K-12 programs, the PK-12 programs. How do they all fit in with this, and what does it look like? And so hopefully you can see better where all of your different programs fit with that. We're excited to have that. Next slide, please. So one of the things that really describes our OEE vision for these grade bands, middle grades and high school, are these key shifts. And we have seen these so far across all the content areas that we've been working on, math and ELA, and now with the science and social studies work as well. The standards have been shifting to be more performance-based, things that teacher candidates will need to be able to do, not just know about. Equity has been infused across the entire suite of standards. So they don't just appear in one particular place, that an acknowledgement of equity, but it's really throughout each of the different domains and sets of standards. And there also tends to be this balance between what content knowledge candidates need to know for teaching and this pedagogical skill. Some of our former sets of standards or current sets of standards tended to be more toward that content knowledge base and not say as much about the pedagogical skill. All of these new sets of standards seem to kind of have a balance, more balance of those, more balanced approach between the two. And some of them go so far as to incorporate them and blend them together. Also, I wanted you to note there is a playlist for all of the video webinars that we have done to introduce the professional math and ELA standards. Sorry, trying to get the link for you so you can get it in the chat. And you can get to all the YouTube videos for math, ELA, and professional. I'm not sure if that's going to be a link for you. It is not. Give me just a second here. Oh, thank you, Susan. And so I wanted you to have that at the ready so you can look at that whenever you have need of it. And then the updated or the math standards document, we wanted to let you all know, and this I believe was in your updates as well. The math standards document has been updated. It's had a little facelift. So it has some new introductory information, some more detailed description of what the committee meant by this PCD approach, or pedagogy content disposition approach, that goes across the standards. It includes an appendix full of resources that might be helpful as you are developing your programs. And finally, one of the other things that it does is it has appendices that separate out between the grade bands, that it's standard D1 that kind of looks at the content and the difference between the grade bands, and that's presented as one, but it has some bolding and italics for the different grade bands. And if you want to see a separate view, here's what we are looking at in 5.9, and here's what we're looking at in 7.12. Those are now separate appendices, and you can see them that way. All right, next slide, please. Some of the expectations that we have started with in developing these standards and that we're expecting as they become implemented in your programs. One thing is that these new content area standards are implemented in tandem with professional standards, clinical experiences, and core teaching practices, right? So they don't stand alone. They need to be incorporated together. Many of our standards actually have core teaching practices embedded within them. So that's one thing to note. The standards encompass a whole program. So they are not just College of Education portions, perhaps. Sometimes we kind of get confused about what portions are covered by these standards. This should be an entire program. So that would be the content needed for teaching, as well as College of Ed portions and methods, courses, professional sequence, all of those aspects. Most of them put an emphasis on candidates having the kind of content learning experiences that we expect for that discipline in grades 5-12. So what that's referring to is oftentimes when we look at the K-12 standards, there is some pedagogical approach implied. And ideally, candidates are experiencing that in some of their content courses in their program, because we all know that candidates, all of us, teach the way we've been taught, right? And so it's important that candidates are able to experience what that learning looks like and feels like. Another key thing to be reminded of and know about is that the MTTC is shifting to align with these new standards, which means because there's more balance of pedagogy and content, that shift will show up in those new tests as well. Those key shifts that you saw on the slide ahead, more performance-based, so there'll be contextual kinds of questions that give a classroom scenario. There will be equity ideas in there about how can you equitably reach these varying students in your classes. So something to keep in mind there about the MTTC. And then finally, these, as you all know, because of the revised certification structure, we now have a narrower grade band focus for the content and understanding the learners. So it's not as broad a range that where you need to understand, in our elementary programs, right, from 4-year-olds up to 13-year-olds. We need to narrow that and really focus on, do we understand the learners in this grade band? As well as the content. It really needs to focus on what content as a teacher do I need to know in order to teach those children what they need. And that content can really be narrowed as well that way. And that also would apply to the specific teaching practices that would be helpful, and what will help students have that really deep understanding. Next slide, please. And this was just kind of a visual diagram of that last point about that narrow focus, but there's really these 3 aspects that really, what do the candidates that are preparing intensely for that particular grade band need to know about learners and learning and their own students' pedagogical strategies, and what content is needed for teaching that grade band. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have been busy working for the past about 2 years. You've seen the updates, I'm sure, on drafting and revising the science standards for the 5-9 and 7-12 grade bands. Some key shifts in these proposed standards. They are multifaceted standards, and what that means is that they shift to a clear focus on all of the different types of understanding. So this is practice and content, that well-prepared beginning teachers will need to teach science, as well as the balance between the core knowledge aspects, between the pedagogy and the content knowledge. And another key thing is they have a direct alignment with the Michigan K-12 science standards. Again, these have that same shift of equity infused throughout. So they have that deep focus on equity. It appears throughout all the domains as well. They will really need to practice on understanding within context how to address the diverse social, emotional, developmental, and learning needs of the whole child. And then finally, they are performance-based. These proposed standards are written in a way that enable a shift toward practice-based teacher prep programs and ensure candidates have multiple opportunities to practice that craft of teaching and strengthen it based on the specific feedback and their enactment in science teaching practices. What does it actually look like when we're teaching science? One thing to note is that the set of science standards that are proposed right now encompass 9 different endorsements, because you know how science is. We have a lot of different various endorsements, like social studies as well. And the next steps, we are right now preparing to present to the State Board of Education in about 2 weeks on October 12th. And then there will be a window open for public comment until December 1st of 2021. So we hope to invite you and have lots of feedback coming in that window.
Darcy, what are those 9 endorsements?
Middle grade science, high school science, and then optional endorsements of middle grades biology, physical science, and earth and space science. And then optional endorsements of high school biology, chemistry, earth and space science, and physics.
Thank you.
I can't type that fast. Could we put those in the chat? That would be great.
And yeah, if there aren't any other questions, thank you, Brian, for switching the slide. Okay, social studies. Oh, yeah, I think we're ready for social studies. Thanks. Social studies stakeholders have been hard at work for about a year. You can see there that their intended shifts and the key areas of focus on that diagram. This is what they are working toward. They have several parts of the standards drafted, and they are working now toward the content pieces. This will probably have a similar number of endorsements when we are finished. And our target will be to bring this to the State Board of Education sometime around April. That's our goal at the moment. All right. Hearing no questions, let's hit the last slide. Thank you. All right, so recently we have been hosting some program revision workshops. I know many of you have attended. We invite everyone who can. It's kind of, Sean describes it like office hours, right? So we're kind of just opening up the door and anybody who wants to come in and talk about it. But one of the things that I appreciated about it is that it's not just office hours for our MDE team for you all to come in. It's this great kind of space where we are hearing folks share ideas, brainstorming, they're posing questions to the group. And so our collective problem-solving capacity soars in those meetings and sessions. And I know I enjoy them a lot. And I think that folks are getting quite a bit of help out of them. So again, I just encourage you to join if you have the opportunity or if you have a question come up. Some of the things that are frequently asked questions, one of them is the question that Beth posed earlier today, and I think Sean kind of already cleared up, but just to reiterate, as you're revising your professional course sequence for math and ELA, it's going to probably impact a whole host of other content areas, because you're not likely to want to do 2 professional course sequences running at the same time. And so the simple fix for that, so to speak, is you can run your new professional course sequence for all of your other content areas like science and social studies and so on, whatever else you might have. But all you'll want to do then is to submit a report of amended program, tell us what your new professional sequence is, and then list all the content programs that will apply to. Some other frequently asked questions tend to be around, one that's come up often is, what are the assessments going to look like? And could we maybe bring a group together that could develop some assessments that around these new standards, so that we would have those in mind when we are developing our courses and programs to kind of match with that. So that's one thing that's been discussed quite often. And then another thing that comes up often is just that these programs have many moving parts. There are lots of aspects in play, as you all know, as you're revising these programs. There's lots of things to consider. And so some of those things are around how do we show or design for grade band overlaps. You know, we want to encourage folks perhaps taking more than one grade band or more than one content. How can we be intentional about designing that for those overlaps? How do we meet these shifts in standards? What does that look like? How do we really bridge these conversations and make these relationships across our departments and colleges to meet those shifts? And then how do we integrate clinical experiences across our programs, and what does that look like? Some of the innovative solutions that have been devised, some folks have proposed kind of a 3+1 course model. There has been a lot of talk around this idea of perhaps we could have a clinical seminar that each student takes each semester, a 1-credit seminar that includes candidates from all levels of the program, but yet focuses on a particular core teaching practice at a time. So we might have first-year students and final year students all talking about eliciting and interpreting student input at the same time, right? And kind of talking about what does it look like in your classroom and how are you enacting it in lessons and pieces like that. Another innovative idea that's been put out there is co-teaching courses between a practitioner and a content expert. And so that's an interesting one. And then it's also been shared some really good ideas for how do you get feedback or have focus groups with your partners in the field about your proposed ideas, and how do you structure for those sorts of things. So those are some things that have been discussed and brought up. You can access I added this link this morning, but that was too late to get into the slides, but I will put it into the chat here. You can access all the notes. They're pretty informal, but you're welcome to kind of look through them at the folder where we've been keeping our notes for the program revision workshops. All right, I haven't been able to keep up with the chat, so please let me know if there are questions that I'm happy to address.
I think most of it been answered. I'm not sure, and I apologize if it was answered. I'm multitasking. We did have a question about the professional standards for, so if they were 5.9 and 7.12, would they take the professional standards subtest for 5.9 and 7.12, or just one for both? I think that's the question. I'm trying to find the question.
Yeah, they would do both. It would be SART tests. Even though the standards are word for word identical, we are talking about different populations of students that are at play here. So it's about understanding the work of teaching with those different age groups, pointing at that middle school and that upper high school. So it ends.
So essentially, the professional standards are paired with the band. So if it's a new band, there's a new subtest for the professional standards. Correct?
Yes.
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 I think that was all the questions. Okay, so next slide. We're going to go into some small groups, and this is just a chance for us to speak with one another, see what other institutions are doing, answer some, just answer some questions. So our plan is to go in groups. I'm trying to look at time here. For about 15 minutes, and then to come back together and share those out. If you could have a couple of items that your group discussed that we could bring back to the whole group for discussion. Questions and note-taking happening still. But would any of the groups like to start with some of the questions and concerns that came up in your groups?
Do you want me to go? Because then I'll look at my Word document, then I can watch everyone's faces later and don't have to worry about it.
Sure.
Thanks, Beth. So, all right, our group was concerned about the capacity issue for trying to teach the courses that are sunsetting and teach the new courses at the same time, and how to overlap and not overlap. I mean, I think that'll be a common challenge. A second one is questions around how are we as a collective going to work with our community colleges, in that some of the MOUs for every, since we all took probably a slightly different but similar related routes with our different grade bandings, what can we do with respect to that work? And so, you know, that's a challenge for some of our community college partners. There was a discussion too over the increase, the clinical requirement and the tracking of the clinical requirement. And internally, there was a discussion that quite a few programs are adopting Watermark and the field experience module, or the field experience component of Watermark. And so then there was wondering if getting the people from the institutions that are actually engaged in that, not like me who's interested, but the actual people who, like Brian, who is knee deep in it, from across the institutions, that could then have a conversation about the logistical implementation if there are common tools being used, and that elevated to, are there other common tools being used, and maybe having the people that work on with those tools as a group that could meet together to support each other. And that's it. If there's anything else, someone could chime in, but I think that was the most part from our group.
Anyone else? Yeah, we talked about the capacity issue in our group for sure, like what to offer, what can we offer, especially with the sciences and social studies and all of the different options. And then talking about, you know, what combinations are the best to offer if there is reduced capacity. And then we had a lot of concerns about the costs of the tests. And then so designing the programs, you know, if they're doing 5.9 and 5.12, that is more tests than if they did 2 contents within 1 band. And then we had some questions too about transfer to other states. So some states don't accept a general science or general social studies. And have we looked into that? Could that be an issue for some of our candidates going out of state, or things that we talked about? And please, if anyone else in the group, if I didn't hit everything.
This is Wendy Burke from Eastern Michigan University. Our group talked about, again, the capacity question and the transition, and trying to also think through just about how to manage moving into the secondary work, and thinking about the middle level and the high school level endorsements and what that means for field placements. I also brought up the question around how anyone is going to track on the different kinds of field experiences across the different bands. And I'm curious if there's anyone in the larger group who might be willing to share their plans. And then others in my group, if you want to share, please feel free.
One thing we're doing here at Saginaw Valley right now with our elementary programs is that we're meeting and we're going to assign certain courses, certain locale codes. Like, for example, we may have one class that when it's offered fall semester will be in a city setting. In the winter, it may be offered in a suburban setting. That's I'm gathering right now information from our local elementary schools to see how many sections of each grade level that they have, and then we're going to be using that to help determine which courses are going to go to which settings.
This didn't come up in our group, but it has come up in our faculty meetings, and it's been on people's mind. We've been wondering with people who also do an MAT program, we don't admit if students come to us and don't have the background. So let's say they're going to teach science or social studies at the secondary level, and they haven't taken all of the science and social studies classes. We let them take those classes as post-bachelors and then admit them into our MAT programs. And we're kind of wondering how people are handling that now, because there are already people in the pipeline who are taking those prerequisites for a program that might look very different by the time they're admitted into it. So I don't have any solutions to that. It's just something that we're thinking a lot about.
That's one of the challenges that we're facing at Western also. And then also thinking about the role of that as we move into the new program, especially in the areas of science and social studies, where some of our career changers have such a focus on one area, and when we're going to more broad field, what that means for those programs in the future.
Another, and I'm sorry, somebody brought this up, another discussion we had was how to support when we're running sort of 2 programs, you know, how to support people who have to, for example, for financial reasons, take a delay, and how to advise them with any accuracy. I think there's a lot of flexibility in MDE that we were made aware of in this discussion, but you know, I'm guessing we'll still run into these kinds of problems with respect to the tests and you know, getting them through one program versus the other, and at what point will we have to make the really hard decision about whether they can finish up.
Relatedly, we've been talking about at what point, when we switch over, do we say you're so early on in our program, it would be best if you just move into the new program. With the elementary bands and when our secondary bands come online, this will be an issue too. The main issue is that either narrows it or they need to do both pre-K 3 and 3-6. And even at that, it still narrows it a little bit because it's not K-8 non-departmentalized anymore. So, so that's tough too, because they signed up for a program that was going to certify them for something very long, and thinking about how we carefully advise people who might be better off switching to the new program, that the band is much narrower.
That also ties back to the point that was brought up earlier about the transfer agreements. And because you start their program at the time they start at the community college, in many ways in the catalog year. We also have a challenge at our university as our catalog is a 10-year catalog. And so when do you say that program, you can't finish in that program and you're going to have to shift?
And in talking to our community college partners, one of whom I talked with just yesterday, they are also very concerned about that.
I am seeing on the question sheet, you know, could MDE, and I don't know if anyone else is maybe struggling with this a little, but host a webinar for content area faculty explaining the importance of pedagogy in addition to the content knowledge. I don't know if anyone, you know, we always have this kind of dichotomy. You know, the content's very important, the pedagogy is very important, and how do we find that balance?
Jennifer, that was our number one, probably our number one conversation in our group. How do you get them to understand the pedagogical side of things when they say, we're going to teach the content area and y'all are going to do the rest? So, yep.
Cynthia. You're muted, Cynthia.
Apologies. One of the things that we're running into is the 5-6 part of the 5-9-7-12. So not only do we need to bring in that expertise that our faculty haven't traditionally had, our secondary faculty, but we are also having to look at putting our candidates into school settings that are really still elementary settings. And they're often the schools that we have our elementary program in. So distinguishing between our two programs is something that we anticipate just being a challenge. It's not going to be something we can't do, but it's going to be something that's going to take a little bit of dancing to make happen.
Any other groups, any other items that you discussed that maybe we haven't brought up already? Trying to read through the document myself too.
I think if I interpreted this comment correctly, a question was brought up for clinical, especially with the social studies, general science, general, and the hours and placements, and like how institutions would deal with that, especially like when you throw on top of that, whether students want to go for multiple bands, but just those general areas, the science and social studies, and determining those placements. And I don't know if that's been identified yet or not, but that's, you know, something that institutions are sort of already thinking about, and reaffirms how important it is for the clinical people to be engaged in these discussions while conversations are going on.
Sorry, I'm reading. This is good. And I encourage you, we'll put, you can add the link to the notes again. Please feel free to continue adding. We will look at this too if we need to circle back and have discussions again. I'm a little curious. Beth, you talked about the new Watermark Clinical. Is that their brand new one? The module that they released, and can that be paired with any of the Watermark tools? I was curious.
Brian?
I'm sorry, I missed that. What's that?
So the FEM for Watermark, is that considered a new, or is it their existing tool?
So, so FEM, the field experience module, is part of the older LiveText product. The there's the the placement management module is part of VIA, which is also getting a name change, but that's a different subject.
Okay, so it's going with VIA or LiveText. It's specific to that.
Right.
It's the Watermark Suites field thing.
Yeah, there is some overlap in features, but certainly all of their development is inside of VIA and the placement management module.
Okay.
So this is Catherine. And just to clarify, because we use that, Watermark renamed VIA Student Learning and Licensure. They also have a field placement manager that runs separately but is connected with that feature. So you do your rubrics and assessments in SL&L, Student Learning and Licensure. You can do your field placement manager in that. And then they are developing a student progress piece, another arm of that, where you can collect their test scores, like their MTTC scores, their grade points, things that you would collect as they progress through a program. And they have not come out with that yet. That's my latest understanding and what we're using.
Okay, but it looks like they're building these things to kind of go with the student. I mean,
it does. It does. And
then, wouldn't work is what I'm saying.
The question around cost, it depends on how your institution structures your cost. So it depends if the students purchase the license, or if you purchase it, whether there would be an additional cost for field placement manager. And where they're headed with that, I'm not entirely sure. You really have to talk to Watermark about cost.
Okay, yeah, I'll check into that. Just curious. Okay, so this has been a great discussion. I encourage you to read other people's thoughts and add to those notes, but we have a half hour left. And of course, one of the feedback that we got was that we rushed the Java-like sessions. So I apologize, but we're probably going to rush the Java-like sessions again. We'll try to do a better job next time. Okay, do we have report outs? Someone to report out? I'm assuming the note takers or designated someone in your group. We'll start with assessment and accreditation.
I can report out on that. Gina just quickly talked about the CAPE conference starting out this fall. It is virtual, and it is 2 different workshops. The first 2 workshops were filled up rather quickly, and CAPE has now offered a second set of workshops, I believe, in November. So just if you're interested in learning more about the self-study, or I forget what the second one was, I don't have that, just look at the CAPE website, and you can sign up for the one in November. Cross-tabbing evidence for your self-study was discussed, and trying to find the best way to do that. A couple of people in our group have been reviewers and talked about from seeing many different kinds of ways to represent that data, some efficient and effective ways to do that. An AQUIP pilot was discussed. We have 3 EPPs in the state that are a part of the pilot with AQUIP, Northern, Aquinas, and Calvin. Calvin just briefly spoke about how they feel very supported in their initial work with them. And then we just quickly said, maybe this is a theme that could come out of or be discussed at the Hope Conference in April, a crosswalk between the similarities and differences of AQUIP and CAPE. Self-study support groups was discussed, and those that are in the middle of doing self-studies, can they get together with other people, and is there a way to support each other in that work? And then finally, the last thing we discussed was, is there any way to streamline completer data and get the best bang for the buck from MDE or from other sources in terms of collecting that completer data?
Thank you, Doug. About certification officers.
Sorry, had your unmute. Yes, we had a good discussion. We covered looking into, some institutions are looking into alt-route endorsements for certified teachers and alum that come back, and they're looking into a different program, an alt-route for that. Sarah Powers shared that U of M already has one in place, and she's going to share some information with the certification officers that asked for that. We asked about an institution that is for the elementary grade bands, for an example, that has decided only to offer one of those grade bands, how that's going to affect reciprocity between other states. Krista shared that it shouldn't affect it, but that when they were researching it, nothing was consistent. So then they did the reverse, and basically people coming in, they'll take a look at it and match it to the closest they can, and vice versa with other states. Hopefully that makes sense. We discussed about further training for certification officers, and if there's something out there currently versus waiting for the Ed 101. Krista shared that for special ed, there is an annual training. Some of the certification officers did express interest in this, especially with MOEX and all of the changes that are happening through there. Krista did point out that if we have different profiles, that sometimes we have to switch profiles to be able to see what we're looking for. And then we also brought up the fact that the vouchers have already updated to the $69, where a lot of our programs haven't moved to the separate grade bands and the separate testing. So most of the tests are still $129. Yes, we can combine vouchers, but if you combine the two, that's $138. So you're actually spending more. It was brought up that one of the institutions went out on their own and purchased additional $60 vouchers to make up that gap, so they weren't wasting money. And that's all we discussed.
Perfect, thank you. Field placement coordinators.
Our group seemed to grow exponentially from the last time we'd gotten together, and it was more than 50% new people. So we had quite a time introducing one another or meeting one another. And so we didn't get a lot of discussion done as we would have liked. And we did focus in on kind of the timeline and processes for submitting forms for field placement. There's a variety here, especially smaller institutions, don't start right away. Many of them start in August through October for placing in January, where some of the larger institutions start in the fall for placing the following fall or for the entire upcoming school year. So just a wide range of when people secure those from the HR departments at partner districts. And that was all we really had time for.
Okay, thank you. And deans and directors?
So we started out talking, most of our discussions centered in one way or another around clinical placements and partnerships with PK-12 schools, talking about the difficulty of getting placements because of turnover of teachers and administrators in our partner schools, just being overwhelmed with COVID and what all's taken place in recent years. We talked about how some institutions are having fewer partnerships, but more intentional, and finding that to be mutually beneficial, offering some mentorship support for CTs and mentors. And we talked about extending that from the student teaching internship semester into the novice year teachers, and that could be an additional partnership, which comes with additional cost, which led us into a discussion about cost modeling at the different institutions, how we cover, should more of our clinical work be credit bearing? Should we be thinking about that as we're designing and modifying programs? And then also the cost of faculty, and should clinical supervisors have faculty status, and the different options and costs associated with that, and kind of left wishing that we have more time, but wanting to discuss a number of these topics further.
Yes. So any additional questions or comments that haven't been addressed? Yes, our time was short, but. Oh, okay. There's a poll. Fantastic. For future meetings, if time is running short, which would you choose? Cut job-alike meetings short and get back on track, or have a meeting go long so we have time to cover the items we need to cover? Thank you, Brian. That's a very good poll. Brian's getting fancy with Zoom.
And I'll close that in just a moment, but I thought I'd just take a quick pulse and see how people felt.
I might offer that our time today in the, what is that called? Java-like, what is, I forget, I'm new, I'm sorry. Might have been truncated because we were introducing and things like that, which is important.
Cynthia?
Yeah, I just wanted to raise something that didn't come up today, but I'm wondering if other institutions are running into concerns about critical race theory and the discussions within the community. We had a student about 2 weeks ago contact us and say that she has a teacher, one of her instructors, teaching critical race theory, and she was not about to be taught how to be a racist teacher, and sent us 4 video clips of all the reasons why critical race theory would teach her to be a racist teacher. And so we had to have a response to that. And we have our social studies folks in particular, our methods instructors, that are really concerned about that. So I'm wondering if that isn't a topic that might be of interest. And I appreciated, Beth, you sharing with us the information about the open meeting that is coming up in a few weeks. But that might be something that we could add to our job-alikes or to a meeting agenda. So I just wanted to put that out there in case others are feeling that same.
Thank you, Cynthia. I was just seeing if anyone else had a comment or a similar situation. I'm seeing a lot of comments for the job-alikes to move them earlier into the meeting. or make job alikes the central focus of the day, perhaps. Sometimes we discuss current MDE topics and job alikes, so I would like having it after MDE updates. Okay. Thank you, appreciate that. We will talk about that when we're planning for the next one. But it is 12:03. Any final comments? I appreciate everyone attending today. It was very helpful. Thank you, MDE. I know I had a lot of those questions on my mind, so you answered a lot of those for me. I appreciate that. Appreciate your support. Okay, it's good to see everybody's faces. I wish it was in person, but hopefully soon.